Welcome to the first of what will be a series of video walkthroughs and blog entries that relate to automated testing, functional testing, as well as load testing, or just about anything else that you're interested in. So today we're going to talk about Firebug. Firebug is a very popular uh, uh, open source Firefox plugin that a lot of web developers use, and it's something we think that web testers and QA engineers should also be using. If you're familiar with Firebug already, that's fantastic. If not, this is a great introduction. But even if you're already familiar with it, we think we're going to be covering some things maybe in this post as well as definitely in the next one that can still be helpful for you. So what is Firebug? Well, Firebug can be accessed once you've installed it, and you can see our blog for where to get Firebug. But once you've installed it, you can click this link, and it's got a bunch of different options. It lets you execute arbitrary JavaScript from within the context of that page, and that's really useful. We're going to see that in a moment. It lets you explore the HTML. You can even inspect down into deep elements, so I can look at the button. You can see it highlights over here, the input, the form field, the div, all of that. I can see style sheets, which is great for designers. I can get in and actually debug JavaScript, which is very, very handy for testing. I can look at the raw DOM structure, and then I can also see the network downloads. This is really handy too if you're running a load test. You got to make sure that if there's traffic that's not just going to your servers, for example, there's traffic on this particular page that goes to Google servers, that if you're doing a load test, you're not going to upset any of those other people or that you've communicated with them. Companies like Google, they're probably not going to mind because you can't do enough volume, but smaller partners could actually want to be affected by this, so you might want to let them know when you're doing any sort of load test. All right, so let's play with Firebug. And by the way, sometimes you'll see Firebug will pop up errors here and there. That's actually kind of just an artifact of browsing through Firebug and looking at some of the inners of the web page. So you can usually ignore those, but sometimes the errors are actually helpful to help you debug things out. So let's pull up Selenium IDE. Let's record a very simple script looking for guitars, and validate that we see some results. Okay, great. So now we play it back, and sure enough, everything looks good. It plays through. But looking at the script that was recorded, you can kind of see something that looks a little suspicious, and that's this the click command. When we clicked on the button, Selenium IDE tried to auto record an XPath expression that represents that button, but the one it selected looks a little suspect to me, and if you've done any load testing or functional testing before, you might think so too. Basically, it's what I'd say is brittle, meaning if any of the HTML structure changes, if we add an extra div right below the body, or we add another button, things could break pretty quickly. So we can actually see that Selenium IDE has several different ways to try to guess what the best locator is. So one of them is this ID relative. Another one is using just indexes and DOM elements. This one's a little better, but still based on the assumption that we're interested in the first form and the second element, which might or might not be true. And then there's another XPath expression that looks a little brittle as well. So let's go back to that home page and let's try to build a better one. And the way we can build a better one is by using Firebug's inspection tool, which is really handy if you're doing any sort of testing like this, functional or load in the case of browser mob, since we use real browsers. So anything you're doing in here that works in Selenium IDE will definitely work in your load test. So let's take a look. We see there's a button here, and we see there's an input field. Well, we know that Selenium IDE was able to capture the name here of Q, and so that was nice. It figured out that the input name was Q and used that. But in the case of the button, it had troubles. But we can make some simplifications in that XPath. For example, we can probably assume that the button will always be right next to or closely around the same containing element that the input is. In this case, the parent containing element for both of them is this form. And so let's go back to Selenium. And let's write a very simple XPath expression that says I'm looking for an input with the name of Q. And then I want to go up one level. So we put 2 dots in. So I'm going up one level to that form, and then I want to go back down to a button. And we can test our new change by just double clicking here, and sure enough, we see it works. So voila, we've got a better expression, and we're able to generate that thanks to to Firebug. So what's something else we can do with Firebug? Well, another thing is that it lets you execute arbitrary JavaScript, which is really handy considering that Selenium also lets you execute arbitrary JavaScript for doing some handy little things like, for example, picking different terms to search for. So let's say we wanted to search for shoes in addition to guitars. We wanted to randomize that, which is a really common request in the Selenium world. Well, the way you do that is with a store eval command. And basically what it lets you do is it lets you type any JavaScript expression and store it to a value. Well, I don't know what that JavaScript expression is going to be yet, but I do know that the variable I'm going to search for is search term. So I can go ahead and pop that in and change that so it searches for a random search term. Well, what's the expression to make a random search term? Let's figure that out. So we're on the home page. Again, you can kind of ignore some of those errors. They just kind of pop up from time to time. And let's say I want to choose from an array where I'm searching for shoes or guitar. Okay, so I can enter that and, hey, I get an array. But what I really want is to randomly select an index from that and use that for my search term. So I can say, if it's array 1, or array 0, I get the search terms I'm looking for. Well, in JavaScript, you can use math.floor and then pass in math.random and multiply it by the number of indexes elements you're looking for. In this case, 2. And when I floor it, that makes sure I get an even distribution. And I don't want to dive into that too much, but you can see now by pressing the up arrow, I can pull back the same command, and I can get different choices. So it's gotten a few guitars, a couple of shoes, so that looks pretty good. So let's go grab this, switch back over here, and put this in here. So let's now click this value, and that executes that. But now let's do the type. And look at that, it changed to shoes over here. So if I click it again, pick a different random one, it's still shoes. Now it's guitar. So I can now play back, and with Firebug's help executing that JavaScript, I got different stuff. So we got a failure here. And well, why do we get a failure? Well, it turns out we were looking for search results for guitar from 21 cities, but we searched for shoes. So that we can even fix that by coming back in here. And we could put in search term, or we could just say search for 21 cities. So let's run it again. So that's kind of an introduction of how to use XPath to optimize your XPath queries and play around with the structure of your HTML to build better tests with Selenium. And remember, these tests can be imported directly into BrowserMob. No special modifications. You don't have to worry about scripting any protocol level communication. And that's because BrowserMob uses real web browsers to play back the load. So once you've got a nice script in here, using Selenium IDE, using Firebug, kind of consulting with your project manager on what the load test should be like, you can just upload that right in. If you're not using BrowserMob, obviously we hope you check it out. But if you're doing this for other load testing tools, it's still really handy to get in there, dig around into the elements, execute arbitrary JavaScript, even see how the Ajax, if you're dealing with Ajax, how those requests get kind of leaked through. Either way, Firebug we think is a fantastic tool. Thanks for checking it out, and in our next session we're going to talk about some more advanced stuff, how to test XPath queries directly in Firebug, as well as different types of randomization and things like that. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.